Hey, what's up, y'all? We're back here with the Eron podcast. I'm here with my special guest, Mary Kate Hamilton. She is
Hi, thanks for having me.
for sure. She is a journalist, and she's at Indiana University right now, and she's graduating. So, Mary, tell me how you got into journalism.
Well, I did like the school announcements for a lot of years. So I did it in high school, and then I also did it in middle school, and I even did it in fifth grade at Springville Elementary School. So I kind of always knew that I really enjoyed doing that. And obviously that wasn't real journalism, right? It was basically like what's on the lunch menu for the day. But I still really liked it and had a lot of fun. And then when I was going to college, I had already been doing that for probably a combined total of like 7 years. I'd already been doing like morning announcement kind of things. But I always loved my English classes. They were always my favorite. So I loved writing. I loved reading. And originally I wanted to be an English major, and then my parents kind of were like, you might want to do journalism because it kind of combines like the writing of English and then also like some of the things that you already have a little bit of experience doing. And then, pretty much by my like sophomore year of high school, I knew that that's what I wanted to do. So I pretty much only looked at schools that had pretty strong journalism programs. And then IU just gave me the most money. And I got accepted in kind of a special program. And so that's where I ended up. And I really couldn't imagine it any other way. I've loved doing journalism at IU, and they've given me a lot of really great opportunities. So that's pretty much how it shook out.
Yeah. So what was it like, being at IU, your first journalism class, what was that like? What was the experience like? Who was in your class? Who was your professor? Like certain things like that. Just walk me through that.
Yeah. So I actually started doing broadcasts extracurricularly before I even took a class. So it was welcome week, and I went to the media school activity fair because I was a good little freshman. I wanted to, get involved in all of that. And I went up to a table that was the Big Ten Network Student U. So I just kind of went up and asked what it was all about. And Galen Clavio, who's my favorite professor to this day, he's done so much for me. I talked to him and he asked me what I was interested in. And I said that I was a journalism student and I wanted to focus on broadcasting. But at the time, I thought I was going to focus more on news than sports. And this program was basically an affiliate with the Big Ten Network, where students could broadcast games that the Big Ten Network wasn't going to necessarily like send their crews out to. So they gave it to students. And he asked me if I would be interested. And I said, I'm not really sure if I want to do sports. And he basically was just like, just try it, do one game and see how you like it. And so my first game that I broadcasted for the Big Ten Network was a field hockey game. And I wasn't super familiar with field hockey. Like, it's a really, really different sport.
Yeah, actually my mom played field hockey.
It's kind of like lacrosse and hockey, and it's really unique. And I had never even like been to a field hockey game in my entire life. So I like watched all these field hockey games on YouTube and tried to get kind of familiar with it. And then the experience of live broadcasting is so terrifying, especially when you first start, because basically the camera guy just points at you and you just have to talk. And the first time I did it, the camera guy pointed at me and I had everything planned out that I wanted to say, like memorized word for word, which is exactly what they tell you not to do, but that's what I did anyways. And as soon as he pointed to me and I was live, I just like blacked out. Like I couldn't remember anything that I was going to say. And I literally just stood there for probably a good 10 seconds staring blankly at the camera. And it was so embarrassing. It was literally a disaster.
Do you still look at that today?
I try not to, but I have gone back and watched it. Well, actually, when I look back at it, it wasn't as bad as I remember the experience being in that moment.
That's how it always is.
Exactly. But I left the game and I was just sobbing. And I called my mom and I told her, I'm never doing that again. Like, that is not for me, blah, blah, blah. And now fast forward, 3.5 years, and I've done probably more than 50 live broadcasts for Big Ten Network. I've actually been rebroadcasted on like the national Big Ten Network for some of the games that I've done with IU men's and women's basketball. And now it's like my favorite thing to do, but it is really, really scary when you start out. But that was my first kind of experience with actual like broadcasting. And then the classes that I've taken have really helped just kind of like back up that more real world experience. So I've had so many amazing professors that have helped me along the way, but really Galen Clavio, who forced me to do that first game, I owe a lot to him. So
For sure. So who are some of the sports broadcasters that you look up to?
I love Doris Burke, obviously. She's a legend.
Mm-hmm.
And she does sideline reporting, which is mostly what I have experience in. But there are really so many. Like, I love Michelle Beadle. I love Sage Steele. She's an IU alum, and I actually got a chance to get lunch with her my sophomore year of college, which was really amazing to hear from her because, she went to IU and then she started broadcasting in South Bend, Indiana. She did a little bit of broadcasting in Indy and then went on to do some NFL broadcasting. And then now she is a Sports Center anchor, which is pretty much, when you're in my field, that's like the pinnacle of success.
Yeah.
So it was really awesome to talk to her. But now I've noticed that now when I watch games on ESPN or, on the Big Ten Network or whatever, I pay more attention to what the broadcasters are saying probably than the actual game. And I found that just kind of picking up little things from people that I like and that I enjoy watching has helped me a lot as well.
So, what are some of the pros and cons of being a journalist that you've experienced?
Well, it's definitely been a little bit of a journey as a woman doing sports broadcasting of just knowing how to kind of stand up for yourself and how to be confident in what you know. I've had people quiz me on my knowledge, like assuming that I don't know what I'm talking about when I do, and they wouldn't necessarily do that to men that are doing it. And also, obviously, right now, it's kind of the worst time ever to be looking for a job in sports journalism because sports are not happening. Yeah. So right now, I kind of just have to be patient because a lot of the jobs that I've applied to have said they're, either on a hiring freeze or, they're going to open their search back up once things start, getting up and running again. But I think a lot of people in the field are experiencing that, regardless. Yeah. But yeah, just little things. And like, I struggled a little bit with like, as a woman in broadcasting, it's really important to like look good, or at least that's the perception that you have to be, you have to look a certain way, you have to talk a certain way, and kind of getting over that. But I feel like the more confident I got with my knowledge and my actual skills, the less I worried about that, which was really nice. But for a while there, I struggled with that a little bit and thought, maybe I don't want to do this. Maybe I shouldn't do this. Maybe I can't do this. But yeah, like I said, once you just get more confident in your actual abilities, I think that becomes less of an issue that you're worried about.
For sure. So, talk me through some, what was the day-to-day life of a journalist? Take me through what you would do in the morning, all the way to the afternoon, to the evening, to night.
So on a typical day that I have a game broadcast, usually I'll wake up, go over my notes, just make sure that I know all of the storylines that are going to happen in that game. So if IU is, playing another school in the Big Ten, if I'm broadcasting it for the Big Ten Network, I don't only need to know everything about the IU team. I need to know as much as I can about the other team as well, because fans of both those teams are going to be watching. And so just because I'm an IU student doesn't mean that I should only focus on the IU team. So I just look over my notes, game notes from press conferences that I had taken earlier in the season, things like that. And usually I have an idea of a couple storylines that I want to focus on throughout the broadcast, but you also want to give yourself room to be able to pick up on things that happen throughout the game. So I do a lot of prep work, but a lot of that is so that I can pick up on things that are actually happening in real time. And then usually I'll get to, whether it's the stadium or the field, whatever, like 2 to 3 hours before the game starts. And in that time, we do a ton of fact checking. We do a ton of, technical checks to make sure that your microphone's working, your headpiece is working. You can hear your broadcasters, but you also want to be able to hear the production truck as well. so that you can communicate with everybody throughout the game just in case something changes, whatever. Usually my play-by-play and color guy will go down to the field or the court beforehand, and we'll talk to the sports information directors of both teams, and we'll usually try to talk to the coaches of both teams. If it's a bigger game, and if it's like IU men's basketball, we might not be able to pull Archie Miller before the game because he's busy. Yeah. But if it's like a soccer game or something like that, usually the coaches are super, super open with talking to us, which is nice. And then we usually do a run through just of like the intro to the game. And that's pretty much the only thing you can plan, right? Is what you're going to say before the game starts. Because once the game starts, that's kind of the beauty of live sports, is you don't know what's going to happen. So yeah, we'll do a run through of the intro, and then from then on, just kind of working with everybody to make sure, my hits are going to be placed at the right time. It's not going to be interrupting the flow of the game. And then usually I'll do a halftime interview with a coach or a player. And then I almost always get a post-game interview with a player from the winning team. So sometimes that's easier than others. Sometimes the SID will pull the player for me, or sometimes I'll have to just run and chase after a player before they get into the locker room and, beg them to talk to me and give me just 2 minutes of their time for me to ask 2 quick questions. Because obviously they're wanting to go celebrate with their team. They're wanting to go, look over game notes and things like that. But for the broadcast, I really like to get a player's perspective on how the game went. If they, had a season high for scoring in that game, things like that. That's kind of an important perspective to sort of wrap the game up. And then we will help, do the set down or whatever. And then I'll usually go to the post-game press conference as well, just so that I have some more background for the next game that I do. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell. And then I go home and I can relax finally, and like you can finally take a breath, because when you're doing live games, like it is stressful and you have to be just on the entire time. So then I can finally kind of let myself go after that.
So what is some of the favorite work, your favorite work that you've done, and tell me how that went and why it was so successful.
So for me, I like to focus on storylines that your typical viewer watching wouldn't know. So rather than focusing on, how many points per game some player scores, or, what role they have on the team, for me, I like to do things that not everybody would know. So maybe an interesting part of their background, or something that happened in practice that everyone might not know about, or, if they had been injured and how they overcame that. Because to me, like my audience that I try to get is people that don't necessarily like sports. I'm still trying to give them a reason to watch this game and keep this on their channel or tune in. But I also do a lot of like just regular reporting. So I do like TV packages. So I've done a ton of stories that I really like. I did a story on a little 5-rider that had leukemia and beat leukemia and is now, a biker for his fraternity. I did a story on Bob Knight coming back to IU for the first time. So those stories are the ones that I really, really like. My favorite game that I ever did was just this past year. IU basketball was playing, and I was the sideline reporter for that game. But it was the same day that IU was playing Purdue for the bucket game. And so they put in Assembly Hall, they put up before the game started, the broadcast of the football game that was going on. And so I got to watch that. And then as the crowd was filling in, they were all watching the football game and cheering and whatever. And so that was really, really fun, just because the atmosphere was just amazing. And, there's nothing like Assembly Hall, honestly. I'm sure you've been to a couple of games there in your time.
Both my
as
brothers
well.
went there.
Yeah. And so that was really fun. And it was nice because I kind of had something else to focus on before the game started. So it helped with the nerves a little bit. And then I had a great broadcast, so there's just little moments that I'll always remember in my time at IU that I've loved so much. But the stories that are meaningful to me are the ones that not everybody would know, and that you have to do real reporting and real digging on to kind of get to the heart of the story.
For sure. So what would you tell someone who wants to get into journalism?
I would tell them that it's a lot of work and that it is really, really fun, but you have to be super passionate about it. I think a lot of people look at sports broadcasting and sports journalism in particular and just think, oh, that would be so fun. I like sports. I'm a sports fan. So I want to do sports journalism. And that's not really the case. First of all, you can't
Yeah.
really be a fan of either team.
Yeah.
And even though I went to IU, like I tried really hard not to root for IU while I was reporting
Hmm.
because it totally comes off in the broadcast and you don't look very professional. Um, but you really have to know your stuff, and you have to be ready for people to quiz you on that knowledge, and you have to be ready to pull statistics out when they're, you know, when they're useful during the game. And you need to be able to talk about basketball, about football, and then even some of these smaller sports. Like I've done soccer, I've done, um, field hockey. Like I said, you need to know what
Hmm.
you're talking about regardless, because if you don't, it totally comes off that way. And then I also feel like in journalism, you have to love talking to people. If you're not a people person, if you don't like talking to people, then that's going to be really hard for you, because you have to be able to get people to open up to you if you want to get those stories that are going to be really meaningful.
For sure. So, um, how's it balancing school as well as journalism, especially during this pandemic?
Yeah, I think that a lot of the times, and a lot of my friends will say the same thing that do sports journalism, we put kind of our extracurricular broadcasts, or, if you work for the newspaper, it kind of comes first before school a
Yeah.
little bit.
That's kind of like how
Um,
athletes are.
exactly. Yeah. So it's kind of the same thing. So if I have a big broadcast one weekend, I'm going to focus on that way before I'm going to focus on studying for a test. And that might sound
Hmm.
bad, but in the end, this is what I want to get a job in. So this is what's important to me. But I have good grades. I don't want anyone to
Yeah.
think that I like completely neglect my schoolwork, but that definitely does come first. And then you just kind of have to do your schoolwork whenever you can. Um, but also part of my job is watching sports. And, that just is what it is. Like if I'm watching a game on TV while I'm doing, my political science class notes, like that just is what it is. Um, so yeah, it does come first, but balancing school, it's important, obviously. And I was lucky enough that in the media school, a lot of my classes um, have to do with broadcasting anyways. I take a bunch of sports broadcasting classes, and a lot of the times our homework will be watch this SEC football game and come in ready to talk about it on camera tomorrow. And so they kind of go hand in hand. And then another thing that I feel really lucky with in the media school is at this point, I know pretty much every single one of my professors very, very well and very personally. So if I have to tell them, hey, look, I have a big broadcast on Tuesday night. Um, can I have an extra day to do this assignment? They'll almost always say yes, because they know that
Hmm.
that is why I'm at school, really. So yeah.
So, what are some of the things that you guys have been doing during this pandemic of, in terms of broadcast news or pretty much, any type of journalism work?
Yeah, so I'm in a news broadcasting class. So we don't focus on sports, we focus on just news. And we're having to do everything now from home, which has been really difficult because we don't have our fancy broadcast cameras to interview people. We can't go anywhere to do stories. But it's been really, really interesting because we have been able to pull it off fairly well, I think, um, just by doing Zoom calls like this, Zoom interviews, and getting footage on our phones and things like that. And it was funny, the other day I anchored our news show, and I had like a stack of books, my phone propped up against like chopsticks and whatever I could find, and just recorded myself at home. And obviously it looks different. It doesn't look as professional as the nice studio that we have
Hmm.
back at IU, but I think it is important to show employers, especially right now, that you are versatile and you can overcome, anything that might, get in the way of reporting. We're still reporting. So I think that's really important. And then in my sports media classes, something that I've really enjoyed is my professor, Galen Clavio, again, he has, as part of our classes now, he's been bringing in sports broadcasters in the field to talk to us about what they do, you know, what their job is like, what their journey was like to get to where they are. And that's been really cool too, because now obviously all these sports broadcasters have a little extra time on their hands. So getting to hear from them firsthand has been really nice. And other than that, yeah, we're all just kind of doing the best that we can. I've taken this time to clean up my reel, add some things to my YouTube channel, just things like that that I won't have time to do once I get a job, which has almost been nice to have this time. And then just applying for jobs and hoping something sticks, and hoping that I end up where I'm supposed to be.
For sure. So tell everybody where they can follow you at: YouTube, Instagram, any type of social media.
Yeah, so my on Instagram and Twitter, which I tweet a lot about sports news and things like that, is at Mary Kate Hamilton 1. So my name is Mary Kate Hamilton, but instead of like the ON, it's just the number 1. And then on YouTube, if you just search Mary Kate Hamilton, my channel and my reel should pop up. But my YouTube channel, it's pretty much my reel, which is like 5 minutes of the best stuff that I have done. And then I have a bunch of individual packages, so like stories that I've done as well. So yeah, follow me if you want.
All right, for sure. So thank you for getting on this podcast. I hope to hear some more from you in journalism and you know, everything that goes on with your endeavors.
Thank you so much, Eron. I hope we get to work together someday.
For sure. Hopefully.